Debt has probably been one of the most emotional topics in money, and also in social media. On social media, you have some of the biggest names discussing this. On one side, you have Dave Ramsey, and he discusses why debt is bad and cash is king. And on the other side, you have people like Grant Cardone, who have literally built an empire and a portfolio of real estate backed by billions of dollars worth of debt. So who's right? I'm going to break down both philosophies. I'll show you what the finance gurus on YouTube are saying, what they agree on, then give you a simple rule set to decide what fits in with your lifestyle. I've spent the last 15 plus years helping businesses in the $5 to $100 million space grow, and I've seen all their wins, losses, and mistakes that they've made along the way. So first off, what is debt? So you have consumer debt, which is your personal credit cards, and then you have asset-backed debt, which usually relies on cash flow of an asset. Most of the arguments I've seen around debt is really about risk tolerance and discipline. So first, I'll discuss the Ramsey philosophy. He's basically stated that isn't just about money, but it's about freedom. Similar to the example he gives about owing your in-laws money. It's not just the money that you owe them, but then now they have the power to question why you're buying certain things, etc. In the famous term he uses, the borrower is slave to the lender. And he bluntly says, debt is dumb, cash is king. So why has he become so popular with this phrase? And it's simply just, he's appealing to the average American or the average person. And why that appeals is about 80% of all people will not run a business, will just work a standard job, save money, save for college, buy a house, etc. And that's the way they'll live their life. So for 80% of Americans, it does make sense to basically just stay out of debt. Why? Because once you fall into the trap of credit card consumer debt, you're just paying a lot of interest, keeping up with the Joneses, also a very common phrase, and you're just basically buying a lifestyle that you really can't afford. His math is pretty simple. You only buy what you can afford to buy with the cash you have. And it makes sense. For the average person, this is very, very good control because you can never go in debt. You can never lose more than what you have. And the opposite is true. If you go into debt, you can lose a lot more than what you have. And that's where people find themselves in very difficult situations like homelessness or very bad emotional situations. If the average person had good control over how they manage the debt, it really wouldn't be a topic to discuss. Since so many people statistically have very, very low savings account balances and very, very high debt balances, the math just doesn't work. So if you're an average person and you're working a job, saving for yourself, retirement, maybe college for your kids, and have a home to pay off, you don't really need to leverage debt outside of what you're already doing for a mortgage. Now let's look at the other side of the table, which is Grant Cardone's philosophy, where debt is actually encouraged. And his worldview is closer to debt is not the enemy, but unproductive debt is. His core idea is to buy income-producing real estate, use long-term financing, and make sure that the rental income covers both the expenses and the debt service to that property. Then over time, with rent growth and appreciation, you can maximize your return on that investment. Now, although he's leveraged billions of dollars against his billion-dollar portfolio, many people might think that this is over-leverage, and I've seen recent videos where everyone's discussing that he's over-levered, just like Meet Kevin had. Again, it might have just been clickbait, but after watching Grant Cardone and his interviews, you'll actually see that he actually keeps a conservative debt-to-equity ratio. And while the average person might think that, oh, you can buy a piece of real estate with 3%, 3.5%, 5%, 10% down, larger deals like the ones Grant Cardone is using, I've heard instances where he's putting 30 to 35% down just to make the deal cash flow. And that's very important. So even at the top of the food chain, in terms of debt leveraging, there is a lot of control over the debt use. Now, there have been critiques of certain real estate investors saying that they have no money in the deal, and it's basically an infinite money return. And how that works is basically initially, if you have a 500K property where you put in 100K as the down payment, and then that property appreciates to, let's just say, 800K, and you're able to pull out 100K additional loan, you've basically paid back yourself the down payment that you've put in. And now all the money that's in there is just debt that's being paid off by the renters. This has been a critique where they're saying that you're using too much debt. However, if the rents are able to maintain the operational costs and the debt service and still give you positive cash flow, that should give you a safe margin to accept any cushions of potentially a downturn in the rent cycle. Now, this type of practice may seem over-levered, and in some instances it is. So you definitely have to look at, is that additional debt costing you on the positive cash flow? And if it is, it's definitely a problem for the short term and potentially the long term as well. At keeping the debt at a fixed rate, making sure that they're buying the property with a lot of demand in the area, and also keeping cash reserves to absorb any repair costs, vacancies, or any change of rates or estimates that you previously had. And this is a similar philosophy that Robert Kiyosaki, from the author of The Rich Dad, Poor Dad, has as well. He stated that the rich use debt to build wealth, and the poor and middle class use debt to buy things that make them poorer. Effectively, here's where the two philosophies overlap. They accidentally agree that debt is smart until it forces you to sell at the worst times. So breaking down both philosophies, leverage magnifies returns, leverage also magnifies mistakes, and leverage can create a zero outcome if you get one downturn at the wrong time, which means everything can go to shit and go down to zero. The real question comes down to, will debt give me more options or will it give me less? In my personal life, the way I've lived my life so far is to stay out of debt. And that's a personal choice because I hate having a monthly reoccurring bill every month and it's unavoidable. It's like paying utilities. You have to pay for it, you use it. It's one of those bills that's reoccurring and I just hate paying every month for the same thing. So if you were to tell me that, okay, now you have a car that you have to pay for monthly, and let's just say it's a second car. Like most average people, they have the second car and a payment on the second car. And I try to avoid those monthly payments if I can. Utilities, you can't avoid it. You use it, you got to pay for it. But something like a car payment, you can just get a cheaper car that works the best. And I'm personally a car guy. So even if it's a $5,000 or $10,000 car, I'd rather buy that and not having a reoccurring $700 or $800 payment ongoing for the next 3 to 5 years. Because there's a slight feeling of like they're taking my money. I understand I've purchased the automobile. If you compare let's say a 2026 Ford pickup, etc., compared to that's priced at $75,000, $80,000, $100,000, and then compare it with a $20,000 pickup truck, they both do the same thing. And now over the years, they're both looking alike and now have all the electronics and infotainments and everything in there. So there's very, very little difference between, let's say, a 2026 truck for $100,000 and a 2016 truck for maybe $20,000. So in my mind, I just can't justify paying so much more, getting into debt for basically buying the same thing. And like I said, everything has been propelled with electronics and technology, etc., that they're essentially the same with maybe a different screen. It's like paying, 10 times the cost for an iPhone, even though the last generation works pretty much the same way. It just doesn't make sense to me. Where I will spend the debt or take out debt for is if I were to buy a company or buy a piece of real estate that actually makes a profit. And these days, the profit has been shrinking on normal deals, let's say long-term 1 to 4 unit rental properties or multifamily rental properties. The margins, the net profit has been shrinking and shrinking. And without a very, very large down payment, I don't see how you could possibly make a deal work today. And this is why certain real estate deals like renting by the room is becoming more popular now because they have larger margins with the same property. So instead of buying a multifamily, you can buy a single family home, maybe rent it to a bunch of college students near a college campus, and you'd actually be making more profit for a cheaper home than buying a multifamily profit and making very, very slim margins, which again has to go into repairs, the maintenance of the property. So this is where I sit on a bit of a hybrid between Grant Cardone and Dave Ramsey, that consumer debt, I feel, is definitely a drain on your resources and savings to be able to make decisions for the long term. But I'm not opposed to leveraging debt smartly on business deals or real estate deals. And basically, what I've seen from Grant Cardone and his leverage is he puts a very large down payment to make the deal work. So now what that means is if you have a normal long-term rental where you put 20 to 25% down, and after all the numbers you put in and reserves and vacancies, etc., and you show a negative number, you can make that deal work by just increasing your down payment, thereby decreasing the debt that you have to pay on a monthly basis. Now that could make the deal work. However, then you have to ask yourself, for all this money I'm putting down into this property, and now I'm getting back maybe 5 or 10%, is it worth it? Is all that money getting put down into this deal just to make 5% worth it to me? And in some cases, it's a big no. If you don't have a large income outside of your investments, real estate is probably not the right vehicle for you, because a lot of people like Grant Cardone use real estate as a tax offset. So once you include how much he's saving on taxes from his other active income, where he makes, probably tens of millions of dollars per year, possibly more, you see that he can save millions of dollars by doing a maybe $50 million deal. He can save maybe $5 million worth of taxes. And that's a significant amount, especially if he's doing more than one deal. But if you don't really have the opportunities of being a real estate professional, or by reducing other large active income, it doesn't really work for you in that sense. But again, if you want to have an investment that's just sitting there for the long term and maybe for your overall family's wealth, then it may make sense to have a 5% net profit that just accumulates over time. And if you're not looking for the major tax reductions, it might work for you. So if I had to give you an answer of who's right, it really depends on your lifestyle. And I always talk to my clients about what their lifestyle goals are and what will work with them, because not every strategy works for every person. Like I mentioned, if you never have ambitions of owning a business, but just saving for retirement, college, and paying down your home, then Dave Ramsey's method is perfect for you. You don't have to get caught up with debt that doesn't really improve your life. And you can be safe to know that in the majority of cases, nothing bad or nothing will be taken away from you if you maintain your job and maintain your mortgage debt. And on the opposite coin, if you do have a passion for running your own business or growing your investments at a dramatic rate than just your normal savings, then debt is a good leverage for you to use. But it has to be smart, and the numbers always has to work. And that's the beauty of projections, is we have the opportunity to see what mistakes could happen before they actually happen. For instance, if you expect interest rates to rise by 5%, you can just pencil that into your projection of what a real estate or a business deal would look like. And then you can tell, okay, if a 5% increase in interest rates from the federal government, how will that affect this deal? And that's the beauty. Not many people look at the worst case scenarios when they're putting a deal together. They might look at it and then avoid the deal, but you have to implement some risk when you're taking out debt. And you do have to be a bit smart understanding the economy as a whole, because even though you think maybe taking out a loan on a business the economy will have no effect on you, you do have to see the demand in your area and also interest rates and everything that may affect you from a federal government standpoint. Debt is one possible way to create wealth. You don't have to use it necessarily. In every type of opportunity that presents itself, I would always recommend project it out and see what potential events might affect you, and then project those events out to see if you have the correct cash advances or reserves to make sure that you can deal with the ebbs and flows of business. So if you'd like to discuss your specific situation, sign up for a call on sqaccounting.com and we can see what type of method is best for you. Thanks.